Last night I had the strangest dream in this bleak century. I dreamed that people the world around believed in chivalry. I dreamed I saw a kingly crown enshrined in laurel leaves, with grace and hope and purity attendant at his feet.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Chivalry podcast. I'm Sir Roland DeGray, your host, and we're back after the winter holidays, picking up where we left off. This will be episode 6. And my guest on this episode is Duke Walrick de Blakeney. So thank you, Duke Walrick, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
If you could just give us a little background about yourself, how you got started in the SCA, what you're doing now.
Sure. So I'm Duke Walrick de Blakeney, for those of you that don't know me. I started in the SCA as a kid. My parents actually got involved first and brought me along when I was about 7 years old. We started in the barony of Triskethier in Atenveld. My parents still play. My dad is Sir Jacob von Groningen, and my mom is Mistress Darney. They both are still in Triskethier. But we started when, like I said, I started when I was about 7 years old. We originally joined Rolling Thunder, and we're part of that group in Triskethier for about a year or so. And then my dad got a job in El Paso, and so we moved to Citadel, the Southern Pass. Played there for a few years, then moved up to Ontier and up in Salem, Oregon. Played there for about a year and a half, I think. It was just a shire at the time. And I don't really remember a lot of the SCA back then. I was a kid, just having fun. Did a lot of boffers. But then we moved back to Tucson, to Triskethier. And that's where I really kind of developed in the SCA as I got older and started to participate more and, was playing less. One of the things that I ran into that I think a lot of kids in the SCA run into is being able to step out of their parent shadow. When I was a young kid, and I was happy to be known as Jacob and Darney's son. And but as I got a little bit older and I started to develop my own identity and got around 15, 16, I started to resent that a little bit and wanted to be known as Walrick and not Jacob and Darney's son. And I was kind of struggling with that, and I was a little bit frustrated with the SCA and how people treated me. And at the same time, in high school, I was a big drama geek, in middle school and high school both. And one year in my drama class, we held a Renaissance fair, and we had invited some other groups to come and participate in it. And one of the groups that participated was another medieval recreationist group called the ECS, which is the Empire of Chivalry and Steel. And they came and they did a demo there. And I was really excited about that because, when I introduced myself and I had the opportunity to do some sparring with them, they only knew me as Walrick and didn't know me at all as Jacob and Darney's son. And so it seemed like a great outlet for me where I could still do the things I enjoyed doing, but outside of the shadow of my parents. And so at that point, around 15 or 16, I joined the ECS and started participating in that group. I still did SCA, but mostly for Estrella. I didn't want to miss any Estrellas. I was still having a lot of fun there. But at that point, most of my attention went to the ECS. And that's where I really kind of developed as a fighter. ECS does a different style of fighting than SCA. They actually have a kind of a progression system. So when you first want to start fighting, you start fighting with shinai, which are, like the kendo swords.
Oh,
And after you've done that for a while, then you're able to progress into rapier. And their rapier in ECS is a lot more like SCA cut and thrust, where it's not just stabbing, you're hacking as well.
okay.
And then once you've done that for a while, you can get authorized in fighting live steel. And so that's fully armored with dull blades. It's not like ACL in that it's not full contact. It's all done at quarter force. You count your blows like you do in SCA. So it's a lot closer to SCA, but with a little bit slower doing quarter force. And so I played in that group for quite a few years through the rest of high school and into college. And eventually I was knighted in the ECS. And ECS actually has a tiered knight progression as well.
Okay.
So kind of in ECS, not all knights are equal. I started off as a knight banneret, which is the lowest level knight, and there's three levels, and eventually became a knight champion, which is the highest level of knighthood. And I was still maybe 21 at that point, and eventually, ECS is still a fairly small group. It was pretty big in Tucson and Triscuitre, but it also had a small group in Phoenix area, and then a pretty large group in Las Vegas. But that was really the extent of the group. And I was, at that point, I was a little bit older. I developed quite a bit more as a fighter, and I wasn't really getting a lot of challenge from ECS anymore. And so I decided I wanted to come back to SCA and start playing that a little more seriously. And so I started going back to practices and participating a lot more. And because I had been away for quite a while, I started to, there's a lot of people that didn't know me when I was playing as a kid. And I was able to introduce myself as Walrick and really establish my own identity there. And then I came in as a much better fighter at this point, and that made a bigger impression on people too. And that made my enjoyment in the SCA a lot more. And that, yes, I was Jakob and Darren's son, but I was also Walrick. And so so then I really started to progress as a fighter and as a participant in the SCA at that point, and played less and less ECS, and really put my focus and my energy into the SCA. I didn't squire to anybody right away, especially really my skill level was pretty high already from everything I learned in ECS. And, there was a lot of things that I had to adapt, when I was fighting in ECS, fighting Shinai, in rapier and live steel, it was all basically touch fighting. And so I had to change my style to be able to generate power. But still, I came in with a lot of skill that I had gained there. So I didn't squire right away, and eventually, I thought about I was doing very well, was winning tournaments. I kind of knew that I would be knighted before too terribly long, and I'd never squired, but the whole time I was progressing, both in the ECS and in SCA, my dad was always there and encouraging me and advising me. And he actually ended up joining the ECS while I was playing heavily in the ECS, and assumed the name Siebold. And there he was referred to as Walrick's dad. And so it was kind of a little bit of a role reversal there. And he was kind of in my shadow because I was well established within that group when he came and joined. But he was always a real kind of driving force and a mentor towards me. And by the time I asked him if I could become his squire, I really was already a better fighter than my dad was. But he still was much more knowledgeable than me, was much better at articulating, why I was successful or why I wasn't successful than I understood. And so it wasn't so much that I needed his tutelage and mentorship. It was more that I was acknowledging what I had always been receiving from him by asking him to be my knight and squiring to him. A year or so later, in 2005, I was knighted at Estrella. This is back when Estrella was still at Estrella Mountain Park, and I was elevated by Phelan and Mariana, and it was a rainy event, and my knighting was actually postponed one day because I was being knighted on the field, and so I vigiled all night, woke up or stayed up all night and was ready to be knighted the next day. And then the crown came and told me that they were gonna we weren't gonna fight that day, and that I would be knighted the next day. So I actually got a full night's sleep on the night before I was knighted, which was nice. So then, kind of before that time and after that time, I did have a lot of success in tournaments. I talk about that since this is the prowess topic. But I was a Queen's champion in Atenvelt. I was also a Warlord in Atenvelt a couple of times. Queen's champion, the way they run it there is an unbelted only tournament. And then Warlord is an open tournament. And I did that twice. And then I also was King's champion, which is a knights only tournament. And generally they do that in 5 mini tournaments, each with a different weapon style. And whichever knight wins the most tournaments will become the King's champion. And then, after finaling and getting to the quarters quite a few times, and I was very diligent about participating in crown tournaments. Every opportunity I had, I fought in crown. I always found that it was a really good opportunity to test my skill and also showcase my progression, especially when I was a squire. But then in around 2008 is when that we won crown for the first time in Atenvelt. And then a few years later, for mundane reasons, I moved to Alberon, Albuquerque, and I've been playing here ever since. I did win crown here in, I think, 2013, and then became a Duke here in the Outlands. Here in the Outlands, I've also been Queen's champion, and which was a tournament. And then I won the Queen's favor when a few years back, we kind of transitioned to having the Queen's champion be a selected individual rather than the winner of a tournament. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm married to Duchess Cecilia. She reigned with me both times, both in Atenvelt and in the Outlands. We have a couple of girls that enjoy playing the SCA as well.
Very cool. Yeah, and let's not forget 2-time winner of the Outlands Prize Tournament.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about prowess.
Yeah. Well, and I would say after crown tournaments, those are my proudest accomplishments, proudest tournaments that I've won. I tried for many years to win Outlands Prize because it's a really difficult tournament. Oftentimes over 100 people from all over the place, and a lot of the heroes of the SCA, the people that I admire most, all participate in that tournament, and to win it twice, I felt very fortunate and very proud of those.
Absolutely. There's no wonder as to why that is. I mean, there's a lot of word fame and renown that can be gained in that tournament, even if you just get to the later rounds. But you've taken it twice, so that's no small thing. So yeah, prowess is the topic today, and I think that it's important with all of these to establish sort of a working definition, what we understand prowess to be. So that's kind of my next question is from your point of view, how do you define prowess in general, and uh, more specifically, what do we look for in terms of prowess as far as the path of chivalry is concerned?
Sure. I guess I would define it as exceptional skill in your chosen craft. So obviously for fighting, that's being proficient and winning in combat. But prowess doesn't just apply to fighting, of course. The same goes for all the other orders, and any sort of activity that you deem your craft. To exhibit prowess in that craft would be to exhibit exceptional skill.
All right. Yeah, I would go along with that as well. Excellence in a skill or trade and denotes prowess. I think
Mhm.
I think that we in the fighting community really struggle sometimes with uh, what prowess counts in terms of being considered for elevation. So maybe what I'd like to hear from you is it just wins and losses for you? Is it just tournament prowess? Where can a candidate for knighthood be? Where can they shine in terms of their prowess?
Sure. Well, and I would say that you could have prowess in armored combat without deserving of elevation. And
Sure.
I think that you need to possess prowess in order to be deserving, but it's certainly not the only value that I certainly am interested in when I'm advising the crown or when I've been crowned. I'm looking for a lot more, but I do consider it to be a gatekeeper virtue. You do have to have the chivalry is a martial order. You have to have a sufficient level of skill in armored combat in order to be considered, in my mind. And I do want to see a lot more things other than just fighting prowess in order to be considered. But that's certainly a gatekeeper for consideration.
For sure.
So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Partially. I think I think to expand it out, I believe that peers need to have prowess and leadership. And
Yeah,
I think
certainly.
that's kind of what you're alluding to, is it's not just about being a good fighter for somebody who's trying to achieve a martial peerage. I think that is the gatekeeper. I think that's one that gets argued a lot because many of us kind of question how much gatekeeping should be involved when it comes to someone's prowess. But I think that oftentimes if we are defining it as excellence in a chosen field of endeavor, I think if you're trying to be a peer of the realm, being able to be a leader and demonstrate leadership qualities, having prowess in that regard is just as important. And
Yeah.
I think that you and I have had several conversations in the past that would lead me to believe that that is also something that you look for.
Yeah, I'd say my basic philosophy is that I want to see a sufficient sum of a lot of different attributes, and so I want to see significant martial prowess. But after that, you could excel at leadership, or you could excel at support for the arts and for service. You can excel at training and support of the fighting community, and you wouldn't have to excel at all of those, but if you exhibited enough positive traits and showed courtesy and still had the minimum martial prowess, then I would view that as somebody that I would recommend for elevation. And so, and of course, when knights are candidates are brought up, they all have different qualities, and for my consideration, and again, when advising the crown, I'm looking at all of those qualities, of course, listening to the other members of the chivalry, and then evaluating my impression of their martial prowess, and kind of looking at that as a whole. And while they might have some areas where they're a bit deficient, if that's offset with areas where they really excel, then I would think they're worthy for elevation.
And I think that recognizing that we're all going to have areas where growth is necessary is certainly a good thing to keep in one's mind when considering advising the crown on any candidate. I think that it can be folly to try to search for that quote unquote perfect sort of knightly individual. I think that there are certainly some folks that live up to some very high standards, but just because they may be the best of us doesn't mean that someone who's not obtained that is not worthy. I think you're right. I think that people bring strengths and weaknesses to the table, and we should definitely recognize when those strengths outweigh the weaknesses, and give that person credit for sure. So we mentioned that prowess is a gatekeeper virtue for our order. Why do you think that is the case? Why is it so sort of, I'd say almost universally accepted that if somebody doesn't quite measure up with enough people in terms of prowess, that they're just not going to make it in terms of being recommended? Now, a crown will do whatever the crown thinks is right, and we've seen that happen. But ultimately, I would say more often than not, crown takes counsel and will generally follow counsel. What is it about prowess that makes it so important in your mind?
Well, I think the chivalry is a martial order. You've got kind of this romantic ideal of a knight, and certainly that romantic ideal of a knight is somebody who is proficient with a sword. And I think for a lot of the knights, that's what attracted them to the SCA, was fighting and seeing people who demonstrated exceptional skill at fighting and recognize those as knights. And so I think we carry a lot of that with us, and that was the impression we got early on, is that this is the ideal. This is what you want to exemplify. And I don't think it is universally kind of accepted within the chivalry that is the most important skill or facet of anybody who's being considered for elevation. But I would agree with you that is the definitely most common. And one of the things that I love about being a peer is that we all have different opinions. And one of the things that's been brought up a lot of times in circle and out of circle, without breaking circle, is that we want to be able to advise people who are interested in being elevated and are on that path of, what's expected of them. And because it's not a set of hoops and tick marks that you need to mark off, it's can be somewhat frustrating to people who are on the path, and that they feel like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're getting conflicting stories from members of the chivalry, but the truth is, it is subjective, and I personally like that it's subjective. That I'm going to advise the crown based on what I believe and what I envision as a knight, what a knight to be. And, I'm going to respect the other brothers and sisters in chivalry to advise the crown, to what they believe exemplifies a knight. And, and then, the crown, it's their responsibility to hear that advice and from people who have different opinions and make that decision. Like I said, when I played in the ECS, it was a much different structure on how people were elevated. And the way it worked there was, it was a point system. And so if you participated in a tournament, you got so many points. If you won a tournament or won a round, you got more points. And then they had things called knightly lists, where you had to win a tournament that at least one knight was in, and then you would get a knightly list. And in order to be considered for elevation, you had to win at least one knightly list, and you had to accumulate enough overall points to be considered. And it had to be in each of the different styles, in Shinai, Rapier, and Steel. But what that did is, once you had enough points and you had your knightly list, then the Shiv circle had to talk about you. And so basically the intent of it was that when like in the SCA, you could have people who are very gregarious, who travel a lot, who everybody knows, and if they're equal in skill to somebody who's a lot more quiet, a lot shyer, they're a lot more likely to be brought up in circle well before the person who's quiet. And that the quieter person could easily be just as worthy or more worthy, but nobody knows them, they're not getting attention. And so I think the intent of the ECS system was to alert the chivalry that, hey, this person has the requirements, they should be discussed. And, you should look at them and discuss them. And kind of superficially, it sounds good. It helps to say, hey, look at it. The drawback is the candidate knows that, hey, I have all the prerequisites. Why am I not getting knighted? Right. And so it made it, where it was very objective. It wasn't as subjective as SCA is, in that you had this point system, but there still was a circle that they needed to pass. But it also had its drawbacks in that it did cause some issues with people that had the prerequisites but weren't getting knighted. And I think that's a lot easier to address in the SCA, because certainly that happens routinely. But you're able to, help to guide that candidate while it's not quite as obvious that they're being discussed. So I think, I do like, the SCA system, and I like the fact that we don't all agree, and that there's not just a bunch of, predefined hoops and tick marks that you have to go through, and that we don't have a universal agreement on what's expected. I think it's good that we all each get to internalize it and advise the crown on our own opinions, not on some consensus that we have within the circle. I think it's great for the chivalry to discuss that. And I think there are definitely some common trends within the chivalry that certainly I try to pass on to my squires as to what's expected of them. But I don't think it needs to be, a consensus between all members.
For sure. I think it's very important that continuing to have the conversation really helps us to, I think, better advise the crown overall. I think that making points, counterpoints, good arguments, better knowing the candidates that we want to endorse. I think it's contingent on us as members of the chivalry or any peerage, I would imagine, to not be so passive about some of these things, and take it upon ourselves to, if I'm going to take the crown's time, and indeed the time of the order, to speak, let my words carry actual weight. Let me know of what I speak. Let me know that what I am saying is of my own certain knowledge and not hearsay. Let it be that it is my true and honest opinion, and that it is not motivated by some kind of ulterior sort of circumstance. I've spoken for people that I don't find to be great company, but if their prowess is sufficient and they shine in certain areas, I think it is contingent on me to speak the truth and bring that to the forefront if there's doubt, or if there seems to be doubt about those things when they're being discussed in council. I think that's very important part of our role.
Yeah. One thing that just made me think of is when I was on vigil, I heard a lot of different advice from a lot of different people. And I'm sure, as you've experienced, some of that advice is conflicting. And so one of the things that I had heard is, when you first go to circle, listen to all the chivalry that's there, that are established, and take that in, and later, when you kind of understand the order and how circles work, you should participate and provide your advice. But then others came and said, hey, you've been elevated, or you're being elevated. You're going to be a knight when you go to your first circle. The responsibility of a knight is to advise the crown, and you're a knight, so you should advise the crown immediately. And I've thought about that quite a bit that night as I heard the two different, and both that were from members of chivalry, giving me that advice. And I thought long on that and decided that the latter, it was the advice that I believed I would take, in that if I'm been recognized as a knight, I need to act as a knight, and that it means advising the crown immediately. It might not be great advice, but it's going to be true advice that is coming from a member of their order, and that's fulfilling my responsibility as a knight to advise the crown. And so I made sure that if I had something to say, even in my first circle, I spoke up and presented that. And I was definitely still young and nervous, and might have been shaken a bit as I presented that in this kind of august company of people that I admired and respected for many years. But I did my duty, and I've advised everybody since to do the same, and have given that advice in many vigils since, that it's the responsibility of a knight immediately to advise the crown and do their best to provide valuable input, and not to be afraid. My personal motto is "Do right, fear not," and I selected that when I was being elevated, and I needed to put a motto on my scroll, or was asked to provide a motto for my scroll. And I looked at a lot of different mottos from history, and that one really spoke to me. Is that do right, fear not. That you always need to do the right thing, and sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's difficult, but as a peer, as a knight, it's your responsibility to step up and do the right thing, and fear not. And so I've tried to do that ever since, and again, instill that in the people that I tutor.
I think I think you bring up some really good points in that advising the crown is part of your job. Never fearing to speak truth to power, because that's what you're there for. I think that all contributes to your ongoing development of your prowess as a member of the Order of Chivalry. I think that becoming good at being a knight means that you practice those things when you get the opportunity. And I think, for my own part, I got, like you said, some of that same sort of conflicting advice, but I took the latter as well, and I spoke in my first council, and I have gotten better at articulating myself as time has gone on. I have learned when it's better to speak, and when sometimes it's better to just listen. I think that those are all experiences that have to come with time, of being involved with the group at that level. You really don't know what it's like until you're sitting there for the first time, and you're kind of internally conflicted. I got something to say, but I don't know if it's just going to be repeating what somebody else just said, those kinds of things. And I think there certainly is that sort of, I guess, possibility. I know it was with me, but again, I think the more you earnestly practice at these sorts of things, about having these discussions out of circle to better understand how you feel about certain virtues, and then also learning how to watch candidates, to pay attention and see what they're doing, so that you can accurately report what you're seeing and what your opinion is. Forming an opinion is sometimes not what people expect out of our job, but it is a big part of our job. And I think that it certainly contributes to maybe that sort of knightly prowess after one has been recognized. So we have an award structure in the Outlands that recognizes prowess before someone is elevated to either the Order of Chivalry or the Order of Defense, depending on your chosen discipline. We have the Thanes of the Iron Heart, which is a very prowess-driven order, and also the Defenders of the White Scarf, which I would argue is equally as prowess-driven. You really have to, not only is it defined, I think, very strictly in the charters of each one of those orders, but there is a sort of aura associated with that, sort of this kind of magical presence, that if somebody's made a Thane, I mean, people have said it many times, they better be able to kill somebody with a spoon, in battle. And though I am not myself a Thane, and I don't believe you are either, I do recognize that that kind of level of prowess is very much held in high esteem in our kingdom. So my question involved with that is let's say a Thane's brought up for discussion. Is prowess really something we have to discuss at this point, if they've already reached that level?
Well, I think every candidate needs to be reviewed and looked at for the accolade that they're being discussed in reference to. So just because a past crown believed their fighting was sufficient to make them a Thane, that doesn't mean that I believe that, and I wouldn't think that the other members of the chivalry should automatically believe that because some past crown believed they were of sufficient prowess, that means all of us have to now believe that. I would say most likely it's going to be true. As you said, the Thanes of the Outlands are the Gus order of highly skilled fighters. But regardless, I would look at any candidate and evaluate them specifically for that, kind of not taking into consideration other accolades they have, and look just at this accolade and whether or not I think that they're deserving of that, and provide my advice strictly based on, my experiences and what I hear from others, not on past awards.
Okay, that's obviously you're not alone in that. I'd say that's probably a rather common attitude.
Well, let's be honest. Crowns are not infallible, right? Crowns make bad decisions. They have personal relationships with people, and might give awards out that other crowns wouldn't give out. And so, I think that it's certainly possible, and it's not to say that there's any things currently, but in the future there could be things that I wouldn't personally believe have the prowess, but are still made a thane by a crown. And so, as a peer, it's my job to advise the crown and not take other people's opinions and make them mine. I'm to present my opinion.
I think that is a very fair way to look at it. And very consistent with what you just said earlier, which is it's your opinion. You're not trying to espouse somebody else's opinion. You're taking responsibility for your advice, right? So yeah, I could see where that comes from. I bring it up simply because it's an interesting thought. There are some kingdoms where it functions in this regard, that almost in the extreme in some cases, where instead of it being maybe a litmus test or maybe a starting point for discussion for elevation, it acts more like a stepping stone, a grant level award that can only be achieved if you have the Award of Arms level award sort of situation where one must achieve one before one achieves the other. And I think that especially if a kingdom went so far as to restrict that by kingdom law, if not only by tradition, that would be rather limiting. And it certainly would not have worked so well for me, obviously, as someone who did not achieve that prior to being elevated to the Order of Chivalry. I think I would tend to agree with you ultimately, that, yeah, form your own opinion, regardless of what accolades have been laid on someone from previous reigns. However, I would also say that there is some wisdom in not belaboring that argument if it is generally accepted by the order that this person deserves to be a thing. I think that sometimes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, in that I would likely talk to their prowess, even only if I didn't think it was sufficient. If there was a thing that was brought up, I would talk to, any concerns I had, and then their other attributes, and like you said, not belabor something that's established. But if I disagreed and I thought it wasn't established, then I would certainly talk about it.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people who want to sit in that circle should stay relevant and understand. And I think that a lot of people, and this is not just our kingdom, because I've had the privilege of sitting in councils of other kingdoms and observing before, and I think that oftentimes we are plagued with this sort of indecisiveness based on, well, I just don't know. Well, if you don't know, maybe you should find out. And there's a big debate that is whether it's official or unofficial. But I had this debate with several people as to whose responsibility that ultimately is. I think that there is a certain amount of that responsibility that falls on the members of the circle, especially after a certain point. If it's the first time a candidate's being talked about, particularly in terms of their prowess, yeah, maybe it's more contingent on that person to fight a wider group of people and really get out there and show off their skill. I think that first, second, third time we've brought this person up, that's probably fair to say. You know, I think if this is the sixth or seventh time I've heard this person brought up, and there's still people that want to question their prowess and not trust the words that are being provided for them by people who have sought them out and tested their prowess, it gets frustrating, I think, is my point. And I think that some folks just want the mountain to come to them. And I think if you have the best interests of the order at heart, at some point, if this person's getting a lot of time in our very limited time as a council, maybe you should get off your ass and go find that person. But
Right.
I know I will be maybe in a minority opinion on that point.
Well, and I guess I personally believe that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be elevated. Certainly when I was a squire, I wanted to be a knight. You know, I wanted to be a knight from when I was 7 years old at the demo and I still had my plastic sword.
Exactly.
And so because I wanted to be a knight, I didn't want to just get the accolade. I wanted to be a knight. I wanted to be the thing that I idolized. You know, I wanted to be that person. And you know, and so, you know, the SCA is a social club. And social club, you know, it has lots of kind of social aspects to it. And part of that is is circles that we're talking about things that we saw, things that we've heard. And if you are someone who wants to be elevated in any order, and you really want that, you need to respect the fact that this is a social club. And you know, if you want, the fastest way to do that is to do all the right things and then be seen. Let people know who you are. Travel, you know, especially you know, fighting, we're actually very lucky in that it's very, very easy for us to display our skill. And so you know, if you're traveling and you can showcase that at practices, in tournaments, and then, you know, again, I advise my squires is not just go and fight there, but then go and talk, you know, introduce yourself, get to know people. You know, this is a social club, and the people that get to know you will be able to talk to you when you're brought up, or talk about you when you're brought up in circle, and have an opinion that they formed themselves, because you've made an effort to go and meet them. And I would agree with you, though, that if this is somebody who's being brought up routinely, a lot of people are talking about them and have had experience with them, well, then it's probably not that candidate's problem that they're not making an effort. At that point, if there's people that are still making a vocal disagreement, or saying that they don't believe in their prowess, but haven't, you know, fought them in years, that's on them, not on the candidate. But I do also see plenty of candidates that, you know, are in a small shire and are, you know, potentially a very good fighter, and are resentful that they played the game for, you know, 15 years and haven't been brought up, or haven't been elevated. And, you know, at that point, it's, you know, you got to make a bigger effort too. I mean, you got to accept the fact that this is a social club. You know, in a perfect world, yeah, all the knights would know exactly what you're doing, and would be able to weigh in on that. But, you know, that's not the reality. And if you really want to be elevated, you gotta recognize the world the way it is, and put forth that effort.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of a nice balanced way to look at it. I would agree that, like I said, it's not everybody that brings up an objection because they haven't fought the candidate. It's generally it's specific individuals that I'm thinking of that consistently make this complaint, but they don't ever leave their barony or shire. So, they are chastising the candidate for doing exactly what they've just done, potentially.
Right.
I think that one of the other aspects of this is that it's changed a lot since my knight's day when he was coming up in the 80s and 90s, and then ultimately recognized in the early 2000s as a knight. I think that the expectation at that time was far more reaching and tied to maybe traveling the whole of the kingdom. Going to Estrella, I think, was a far more important, particularly when it came to really being able to demonstrate your prowess in a battle and not just a tournament. I think that regional notoriety is important now in our kingdom. I think that if one half of the kingdom or the other pretty much knows who you are, an argument could be made to the guy in the other side of the kingdom, exact opposite end of the kingdom, that doesn't really know you, or the knight that's never fought you. I think there's a balance to be struck there. I think that I would say that describes many of the elevations that I've seen and since I've been playing. There's been several that I can point to that if one half of the kingdom or the other, in terms of members of the circle, can say this individual can fight, then it's generally not fought heavily by the other half. Certainly, if you can get notoriety throughout the kingdom, that's probably best. But I think that it's not insurmountable or unreasonable to say, hey, you should be able to travel to the 3 or 4 other groups within 100 miles of you so that those people there can see that you are that you've got the skill necessary. I think that at least is where it needs to begin.
And I think that's kind of very, kingdom to kingdom.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Certainly in Atenvelt, you have 3 baronies right in the middle of the kingdom, and the kingdom's not that big. And so there, you almost expected to know any candidate that was brought up. And if you didn't know them, they probably weren't there yet. Here in the Outlands, like you said, it's more of almost a north and south thing, in that, if you're having a circle in the south, the candidates in the south, you expect a large quantity of the people to know them and be able to speak to them, but you don't have that same expectation of the people in the north of a southern candidate, and vice versa. And I think all the members of the chivalry respect that. We say, okay, if this is a northern candidate and the northern knights all believe that they should be elevated, the southern knights are going to support that, because our kingdom's big. And it's really difficult and kind of unreasonable to have the same expectation that you might have in Atenvelt, to have that in the Outlands. And I'm sure that that's similar in other large kingdoms where you really can't see everybody who's being brought up.
Yeah. It's certainly going to be a case-by-case basis, kingdom to kingdom, I would agree. So moving a little bit forward, what obligation are we under as members of the chivalry to maintain prowess?
So, you provided these questions in advance, and I looked at this one. I thought it was a really interesting one. And it's one that I've discussed with Cecilia, my wife, and not just about chivalry, but about laurels. She's a laurel. And in that, what I think happens is that as especially for chivalry, as you get older, your body starts to break down, and you're not able to be as successful in combat as you were before. And while you might still have the skills, you don't physically you can't do it. And and I think for like laurels and other peers, or specifically on laurels, that you might have been elevated back in the very early days of the SCA, when there weren't a lot of resources available. The expectation for your prowess at arts, your skill was a lot less. People were impressed a lot easier. But nowadays you have a lot more resources. There's a lot more, a lot more access, with internet, but also a lot more people that have already learned crafts and can now impart that on you. And so I think the expectation there is a lot higher than it used to be. And so I think in terms of laurels, you might have some that were elevated when the bar was a lot lower and the expectation a lot lower, but they still want to be considered as a laurel. They still value that accolade. And so when they're looking at other people's art, they measure it against the art that they produced when they became a laurel. And so I think the bar for them will be a lot lower than maybe for someone who is more recently elevated. And I think kind of the same goes for members of the chivalry, in that it starts to be a lot more difficult. Sorry, my dog just did something weird. And so I think it starts to be a lot more difficult one to maintain the same level of prowess as you get older, and and potential injuries and such. But you still have that desire. You still want to consider yourself a knight. You still want to consider your prowess to be worthy of being a knight. And so I think it's something that a lot of knights struggle with. It's something that I'm a little concerned about myself. I had some pretty significant surgery about a year ago on my right hand, and I know it's affecting will affect my fighting. Actually, I haven't fought since the surgery, and it's something that I know is going to be something I struggle with. And I think that's true for knights as they get older. And so, when you're freshly knighted, I think you're still energetic, and you absolutely still want to participate. I think the expectation from other knights and for the crown that knighted you is that you continue to participate and you continue to grow. But eventually you start to get older, and while you might still have the skills and mentally how to do it, your body just can't do it anymore. And but you start to again, you're like looking at new candidates and say, okay, I can't beat this guy, and I don't want to say he's not good enough because I can't beat him, and I'm a knight, and I still want to consider myself a knight and deserving of being a knight. But at the same time, people are saying he's not good enough, but he can beat me really easily. And so I think that there is a level of expectation, that you continue to maintain prowess. But again, the reality of that is that's not going to last forever. And there's going to be kind of a response to that I think is natural. And I think that a lot of knights struggle with, especially as the SCA is getting older, and members of the chivalry are getting older, and either deciding to continue to fight and just fight at a less sufficient level than they were accustomed to, or stop fighting. And I'm sure that raises questions in their minds about kind of the of deserving that accolade. And of course, everybody's going to tell them, and I certainly would, and I certainly believe that, if you were elevated, whether you're able to fight now or not, you're still a knight, and you still have a lot to give, and a lot that you can do as a knight to continue to support the fighting community and your crown. But just in the kind of the reflection I've had since surgery, and knowing that there's a good likelihood I'm not going to win another Outlands prize, it's made me kind of have second thoughts, or not second thoughts, but thoughts about who I am, now as a knight, if I'm not able to fight at the same level that I've been accustomed to.
Sure. It's got to be a struggle. I would imagine. I struggle with it, and I don't think I'm anywhere near the end of my career. And I think about how it's important to maintain my prowess, or in some cases, for my own personal goals, I want to improve my prowess to the point that that I have a better record in terms of wins and losses, and in particular, in the last several years since being knighted, I've really shifted my focus to melees and becoming a better commander and becoming a better leader in that regard. I think that's where a broader definition of prowess comes in a little bit more handy. I think in the early days, maybe the flower of one's chivalric journey, when they are being considered and when they're first getting elevated, being able to best one's peers and to be able to mix it up with those that are of a similar age and experience level is really important. And I think that shouldn't change. I think that I think I was certainly judged not only by the people that were about the same in terms of experience, but also those who were active in the chivalry at the time that I was being considered. And I think that speaks to one's personal journey, and those are important experiences, and they shouldn't be substituted. But I would say that when a knight begins to get up in years, and as you say, maybe the body begins to fail that person one way or the other, I think that their prowess in terms of being able to be a leader in the community, being able to teach, being able to impart that knowledge and continue on to help others achieve that goal of the white belt, the spurs and the chain. I think that if you can contribute to the community, no matter what it may be, maybe it's you are going to be the best damn field marshal we have in the kingdom because you just know what you're looking at, and you know how to judge those situations, you know how to handle that, and you're going to step up and give that service as a knight. I think that is a worthy endeavor, and that shows prowess in a way that is not maybe our traditional way of looking at it, but I do believe that you hit on it. You still have something to give, even if you can't, beat everybody up and down the block like you once were able to. And if you are still willing to give and contribute, I think that nobody's ever going to think of that person as less than the knight that they are. I think that it's the ones that maybe disappear because so much of what they did in the game was tied to their ability to fight. And I haven't experienced that as much, but when you talk to some of our members who have been playing for 20, 30 years, they know plenty of knights that, they stopped playing long before they lost the magic because they knew that once that happened, they weren't going to have fun. And far be it for me to tell anybody how to have their fun, but I take comfort in the notion that I find other aspects of this game rewarding, so that I think that I will be deserving of my knighthood long after my body says I can't do it anymore, because I think I will continue to contribute to the marshalate in a way that is significant.
Yeah, and I think, the people, or the knights that have prowess in things other than fighting but are associated with fighting, are the ones that tend to be more successful in the long run as far as continuing to participate and contribute. And absolutely, there's a lot of people that have inspired me and taught me, even though they were no longer on the field actively. One thing that this made me think of a story about kind of the, when you're hearing advice from somebody that you've also been bested by, that advice will oftentimes carry more weight, and I was back when I was a squire. I was at a fighter practice, and an individual walked up that I'd never met before, didn't recognize, in mundanes, and I was fighting somebody, and this individual interjected and said, "Oh, you ought to try doing a spin shot." And I was like, eh. And so then he's like, "Yeah, this is how you do a spin shot," and he showed me how he put his feet to kind of prep for a spin shot, and I just was like, "Okay, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it." And then, I went back to fighting and didn't think twice about his spin shot. Well, that weekend, I was at an event and I see that same guy, and now he's all in garb and he's got a ducal coronet on his head. And suddenly I started thinking back to, whoa, shoot, what did he tell me? How did he, set up his feet? And, that same advice that I got, a day before, a few days before, meant nothing. But now that I say, okay, this is somebody who's a Duke, and it was Duke Walrick, who has, been king in, I think, 4 different kingdoms, and was just traveling through mundanely and happened to, come out to our practice, and then went to an event that weekend, didn't have any armor with him. But that once I saw that he was a Duke, I definitely was a lot more interested in his advice. And I think that that's something that potentially knights can struggle with too, as they get a little older and they're not fighting, and maybe have even been removed from fighting for several years, and then still trying to advise new fighters who don't have that experience of having fought them or been bested by them. And I think there is obviously a lot of weight in a white belt, and certainly as I was a up and coming squire, I would listen to anybody that advised me, and or at least any knight that I knew was a knight. But I would think that for a knight, there's going to be some amount of trepidation about providing advice to somebody who doesn't know you and doesn't know when you were a force on the field. And I don't know. I think maybe it's something that has just been more on my mind, in recent months, since I haven't been fighting, and what if it gets to the point where I will obviously someday get to the point where I'm not going to be fighting anymore, how that's gonna how I'm gonna interact in the SCA without something that's been a driving force for me for a long time. And I don't know. I guess it's just something that I've been thinking about lately.
I think about that sort of thing too. I think that it's a natural sort of progression, really. There will become a point where what I have to say about someone's technique or their approach is going to have less weight, simply because the person I'm speaking with will have never known me at my peak. And and I think that I hope, for my sake and yours as well, that doesn't keep me from dispensing advice to somebody who's willing to listen. But it certainly will probably keep me from dispensing advice to somebody unsolicited without knowing that person first. And I think that's probably for everybody's benefit ultimately. Because I think that we've all, I don't know about you, I can't speak for you, but I've certainly experienced some folks who think that their advice is still relevant, and in some cases it's been in fact against the rules because they're not keeping up with what's going on. So I think that staying relevant is something that a lot of folks in the early days of the SCA are struggling with even now.
Yeah. Well, and I think having, prowess in more than one thing is going to enable you to be a lot more successful in the SCA too, and especially in the long run. I mean, there's certainly a lot of people that are, double, triple peers, and it's because they've got prowess in a lot of things, and they have a lot of different outlets and things that keep them interested and inspired. And one of the things that I've done a fair amount of that I get a lot of joy in is commanding. Doing small unit commanding, but also doing commanding armies, and devising tactics, and looking at scenarios and coming up with approaches, and advising other commanders on how to do that. And I know you and I have worked on stuff quite a few times, and that's something that I take a lot of joy in, and that isn't the impact of that isn't on an individual basis, that it's not what I personally contributed, the number of kills I personally got, it was the overall strategy and tactics and implementation of those tactics that led the army to be successful, and certainly I've always taken a lot of pride in any successes that the army had when I played a leadership role or commanding role in that. And, that's something that, it's, I guess, another thing that I consider myself to have prowess in, and something that, can certainly continue to inspire me and drive me to greater excellence as I get potentially a little older and aren't able to personally have as many victories as I used to.
That's a great point. Actually leads right into kind of the next topic, which is battlefield prowess as a concept. Speaking about sort of the development of how we look at candidates over time. Speaking not as somebody who would know personally, I've only been a knight for 5 years, but speaking with my knights, Sir Thomas, and those who've been around a lot longer, Kapora says something very specific, talks about winning tournaments in traditional SCA style combat. That's what's to be used as kind of the fence post. I think in our kingdom, and I suspect in other kingdoms, that being able to lead, command, and fight in a melee scenario is certainly something that is of merit and is considered and is discussed. And so, I think that it's something that I've taken a lot of interest in as of late. And as you alluded to, we've collaborated several times, and take a second real quick to just say thanks for that, because the truth is that when I first stepped up to try to help lead whoever, when I raised my hand to volunteer, I got a lot of unhelpful help from a lot of folks. But you always showed me, a lot of respect and a lot of courtesy, and always pulled me aside, gave me some tips, pointed out things that I could have done better on, helped me formulate strategy on the fly. You've been a good mentor on the battlefield. You're one of many, but certainly one worth noting. So battlefield prowess, I think, is a very important aspect that to our kingdom in particular, but I think it's something that's become more and more a focus feature across the known world. Here's a tough question though. Will battlefield prowess ever substitute tournament prowess in terms of consideration?
Well, again, I think it's up to each member of the chivalry to make that or form an opinion of that on their own, and advise the crown accordingly. I think for me personally, I want to see any candidate be able to hold their own in a tournament.
Okay.
So now that doesn't mean they have to be winning them, but they need to be able to hold their own. Right?
Sure.
I don't want. One thing I've heard in circle a lot is, if we made them a knight and they went to another kingdom, would they embarrass us? Would they be a bad reflection on Outland's chivalry?
Sure.
And obviously that's mostly has to do with what kind of person they are and how they interact with other people, and would they be an embarrassment to our order? But I think the same would be true for their fighting prowess. If they go to a tournament and they can't beat mid-level non-belts, that's gonna have a reflection on them and on our order. And so I'd want to see anybody who was being recommended be able to hold their own. That when anybody goes to fight them, they know that they're going to fight. This is not a bye. This is going to be a tough match, and that they're able to generate that kind of response, and in a tournament and on the battlefield. Again, kind of the way I look at it is it's a sum of a lot of different things. Sure. And so if you had somebody who could hold their own, but not necessarily excel in tournament fighting, but they had a lot of prowess, either as an individual contributor on the battlefield or as a leader on the battlefield, that would weigh on my decision to recommend them. But I would want to have still that minimum bar on tourney fighting that they'd be able to hold their own.
I've begun to adopt a similar mindset. Is that I want to feel confident in that person's ability in all aspects of fighting, but I will certainly, once they've met that confidence level, if one shines more than the other, then good for them, and let's lift that up. Let's make that something that is of worth and something that we want to kind of highlight as being worthy. I think that's a good approach. The battlefield prowess kind of notion. I think there's a lot of people in our kingdom that if they could get to that sort of solid competency in the tournament, that the battlefield prowess would carry them over. Right. But I think that group fighting is a lot easier for people to buy into, or at least in this kingdom. I don't know if that's the case everywhere, but I think that when you're talking about getting people motivated to be a part of the team, it becomes this sort of force unto itself, if you will. I know you've experienced it being a commander in two different kingdoms. I certainly have experienced it, that when it gets to be war season and we're all kind of foaming at the mouth going into Estrella, and we just want to get out there with our guys and our fighters and show them what we've been practicing and how good we are, and prove our worth as a unit. And there's this cohesion that sort of gets formed over those months of war practices that leads into that kind of big climax there at Estrella, and it's this huge sort of movement unto itself. And I think it can be a lot easier to motivate people to really get caught up in that. And I think tournament fighting takes a special breed of folk, honestly, to not to necessarily be competent at it. I think that there's a plenty of pickup fights for any one person to get at any SCA event to get decent at single fights. But I think that to be good at tournament fighting, there's a lot of head game in there that takes some time to work through, and everybody's got their own head game, and being able to either shuck it if it's a burden or enhance it if it's to your advantage can be a struggle for a lot of us on the path of chivalry.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, fighting in, later rounds of, large tournaments, Crowns and Alden's Prize and the Roses tournament and a lot of other tournaments that, when if you've made it to the final rounds, you're either, phenomenal athlete, or, you really are very in tune with SEA heavy combat, and you're managing kind of that head game. I see great fighters, and I hate to call him out, but your knight, Sir Thomas, who would come out to practice and just wail on people, and then go to Crown and be out in 2. And it's a different breed, that are successful at the highest levels in tournaments. In that, in a lot of ways, it is kind of often at times a chess match, and that you've got to be really focused when you're in that fight. Especially, you'll see these fights that are very long and that are very kind of defensive battles, where you're really not so much trying to get the best shot. It's not make a mistake.
Yes.
And because both you and your opponent are on the top of their game, they're really focused, and so you're evaluating what your opponent is doing constantly. You're looking for patterns that you can try to take advantage of, and that all that while trying not to make any mistakes that are going to put you at risk. And it takes a lot of mental effort and focus to do that, and people handle it different ways. I think probably most of us, while we're in the fight, again at the highest levels, are working on all of those things while they're fighting. They're thinking about opportunities and focusing also on not making mistakes in order to win that. But when they're not in the fight, people handle it differently. I see people who are really invested in winning this tournament, oftentimes Crowns, where they want to be left alone between rounds. They put in headphones or something to just try to kind of take them out of the moment. And for me, I like to watch the fighting, and especially I'd watch the top contenders, and I would try to think about the strategies I'd want to employ when I eventually face them.
Yeah.
I look for what's their opening shot. What are they doing with their feet? How are they holding their shield, so that I'm not coming into that fight, and then trying to devise my strategy. I want to try to get it done in advance. So I tend to stay kind of in the tournament the whole time. As I've gotten, I guess, more relaxed in tournaments, and I'm not as driven to win, I tend to be a little bit more casual now between rounds, and not worry so much about devising my plans, and I'm not as invested in winning the tournament. But back when I was really focused on that as a squire, or in the Crowns that I did win, or the Crowns that I was trying to win, or Outland's Prize, I absolutely was doing that and heavily focused on that. And but I think people approach it differently. But kind of at the higher levels, it's definitely a mental game, and it's mentally taxing. You're physically getting worn down by the fights, but it's mentally taxing too. And I know for me, at a lot of these things, like at Outland's Prize, I'm not partying that night. I'm toast. From both the fighting and from the focus, and maintaining that focus for 8 hours for a big tournament like that. It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, and I think that's where the prowess thing comes into place. Is how practiced are you at kind of facing that onslaught of stimulus? Like you said, there's a physical stimulus involved, whether you're getting struck or not. You're having to move, you're having to avoid things, you're trying to put your body in the right position. You are dealing with muscle memory. You're trying to assess things on the fly. And then the huge mental strain that comes from being focused enough to carry it through, like you said, sometimes 7-8 hours on some of these really big tournaments. And it certainly factors in that having a game plan for how you handle that is important. And I think it is as varied as there are knights in this world or fighters in this world, as you kind of alluded to, but understanding that that you need to take shade when you're not fighting is important, and understanding that you should drink water between every round because that's important, and keeping yourself in a good physical mindset and health in between rounds is important. And I think sometimes young fighters can fall prey to a little bit of hubris in terms of, oh, I'm okay, I don't need that, or or I'm going to stand out in the sun and watch all these fights and this, that, and the other. And it's like, I chuckle a little bit, it's like, yeah, that's going to bite you in the butt at the end of this tournament when you are dragging and everybody else is still fresh or fresher than you anyway. That's definitely part of it, I think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people approach fighting in tournaments in different ways. Certainly, I've always been driven by competition. I love competition. I thrive in it. I think it elevates my game. In whatever type of competition I participate in. I really enjoy that, and it inspires me to greater things. Other people, will kind of crumble in that, and others aren't inspired by it. They enjoy fighting in tournaments, but they want to take it casually, and and that's great. SCA's got different things for everybody, but for the people who tend to be the most successful, it's people who enjoy competition and enjoy kind of those intricacies and the more subtle aspects of fighting and of the mental game, that they enjoy those things and can thrive under that. And so, the people that you see winning these big tournaments are those types. And, that's, I guess that's what is attractive to them. And, and those are the people that are going to have the most prowess and be able to be successful in those situations, are people that kind of thrive under those conditions. And certainly that's been something that I've always really, really enjoyed about fighting. And I would see that people that might be able to beat me in practice wouldn't do as well in tournaments, just because that was something that really drove me to greater success and greater focus when fighting.
I've had a really mixed bag with it. When I first started fighting, competition really drove me hard, and I have a stature that lends well to certain styles of fighting. But then I realized very quickly that those styles were limiting in my ability to beat other things. Being big and being strong is useful in this sport, but it's not the end all be all. Particularly when your opponent is more agile, faster, better hand-eye coordination than I'll ever have, that sort of thing. So my focus has certainly shifted over time into better understanding body mechanics and that little piece that you mentioned earlier, which is be the person that makes the least amount of mistakes. And that speaks to me as an athlete playing all the way through college and doing that. Anybody that's ever been any good at football understands that it's not always really who's the best team, because more often than not, the teams are equally matched skill-wise. It's who makes the least number of mistakes during the game. And tournaments can be that in spades. We talk about football being a game of inches. Tournaments are a game of inches. Like one corner just put in the slightly wrong position means that flat snap gets through and you're dead. And
Yep.
and sometimes it's when you see the caliber of fighter that makes it to the ends of these big tournaments, their prowess is tremendous, and you're just waiting to see which one is off by a hair. And those are the fun ones to watch, I think, because then you know that they're giving it their all. There's no question that they're fighting honorably because they are just that good. I love watching a tournament like Outland's Prize or a Crown where the two people are well matched and it's down to the inches. And when that person arises victoriously, you know that was well fought, well earned, and worthy. And those deeds of prowess upon the field are truly inspiring to me. And I really enjoy when that gets to be the case. And I find more often than not, it generally is. So I'm gonna get things kind of wind things down. A couple of final questions here for you. So part of having these conversations is to kind of speak to those who might be on the path to chivalry. And I've often asked, like, what advice would you give if a candidate, whether they're a squire or not, just somebody who's trying to be worthy of the belt and chain and spurs? What do you do when they kind of struggle in a certain area? I think one of the hardest things to deal with in terms of prowess is when you've plateaued. I think that's how we describe it a lot in the jargon of fighting is generally you'll see, there's a beginning phase to somebody's experience. Then there is a time of rapid growth to a certain level, and then there's a plateau, and then some more growth, and then a plateau. And then sometimes that plateau lasts longer than the last one, and it can be a little discouraging. So as an experienced fighter, somebody who's been fighting since a very young age, I'm sure you've experienced this pattern yourself. So what is some advice that you might give to somebody whose prowess is plateaued on how to break that or cope with it in a more constructive way?
Sure. Well, I guess two pieces of advice. And one is, it kind of goes along with what you're saying, because I agree that progression tends to follow that pattern where you increase kind of rapidly, then plateau, and then increase rapidly. So I would suggest, one, be patient. That the plateau will end, and you'll something will click in you, and you'll start to improve again. But one thing that I found that really helped me be successful, both when I was first just starting to fight, but then also as I got had more skill, but still had a lot of room to improve, but was stuck. And that's to start to think smaller. What I would tend to do, and I think a lot of people tend to do, is they fight to win all the time. And so they go out tournaments, they fight to win. They go to fighter practice, they fight to win. And where you could really improve is to fight to improve, not so much fight to win. When you go to tournaments, fight to win. But when you're at practice, use it for practice. And so don't worry so much about how you fared against this guy or that guy, or how many wins you got that day, but how much you were able to improve. And think small. Think, okay, I want to work on my offside shot or my leg wrap, or I want to make sure I don't want to lose my legs today. I want to focus on not getting legged, and don't and accept the fact that you're going to lose more than normal, than if you're just focusing on winning. But what that allows you to do is improve those subtle aspects of your fighting. So then when you start to just try to win again, now your wrap shot's better, your offside's better, you're blocking, you're not losing your legs as much, because you invested the time in practice to really improve those things. And so that's what I would do a lot, is that I would come to a practice and I wouldn't kind of look at the practice and go, okay, yeah, I did pretty good. I only lost a few fights, or I had some great fights against this guy. Instead I'd say, hey, I only got legged twice all practice. And that was my goal, is to really focus on my defense there, and not, I might have lost 10 times or 20 times, but I didn't lose my legs, and that was my goal. And so that's something that I would advise people to do if they start to plateau, is, stop doing what you normally do, and change up the way you approach practices specifically, and really focus on improving. And then a big part of practice and improving is to seek out the advice of others. And so if you're working on something specific, talk to other people about how you can improve, or how they are successful at that technique, and then try to utilize that, or tailor it to your fighting style. But think small. Think about small aspects of fighting rather than just winning overall, and focus on that, and feel proud with the improvements you made on that small aspect, and not worry about kind of the bigger part. If that's your goal, is that small aspect, focus on that, and count your victories, your improvements based on just that small aspect, and then incorporate that into your overall fighting.
That's good advice. I've received similar advice on my path, and I think that it has paid dividends for me personally. What I like to do in particular is challenge myself with weapon styles, and or here recently it's been weapon styles, but also switching up size and shape of shield. Because I feel that I would be described by others as being above average with a sword and board, particularly of a certain size and type. But I think to challenge oneself is a big part of maintaining prowess in the long run. And I would agree that if you're going to break a plateau, picking something to work on is much more doable than trying to just say, well, I'm just going to be better. It's like that old adage of, how do you eat the elephant? You got to do it one piece at a time, and breaking it down into manageable goals is sound advice. And it as somebody who has used that technique and had it work for them, I would endorse that way of thinking very much. It makes the journey a little bit more focused, I think, and then you can like you said, you can celebrate those victories, and then begin to incorporate what you've practiced into your tournament routine. And I think one of the things that we suffer from a little bit compared to maybe some of the phone games out there is that helmet time will fix a lot of things, because the more reps you get, the more you experience a style of shot, or a particular technique, or a defense, the more you have had time to defeat it or defend against it in your mind, and in actual practical movement and technique. So I would just add to what you said, try to get as much helmet time in as you can on top of focusing, because I think that that will certainly break the plateau a little quicker. Now, it depends on what your time scale is, right? So, I mean, if you're not worried about getting it done in 6 months, then it's probably not that big of a deal. But if you got a time you're trying to keep, it might be a little bit more important to go to that extra practice a week if you're able to.
Yeah, another thing that I think is helpful, and certainly helped me, is having like training partners, but not just people that you're fighting against, but people that are invested in improving. and want to see you improve and want you to help them improve. And when I was or really before I was a squire, but still an up and coming fighter, there was 4 of us in Triskater. They were all non-belts. None of us were squired, and we all wanted to improve, and we wanted to see each other improve. We were all friends, and so we formed what we called the 4 Horsemen. And that's what we did. Is we'd go to practice and we would encourage each other, but we'd also, we would come with and say what our goal was for that practice and tell the other people what our goal was. And so then we would all help each other, where, if I came and said, all right, I want to work on, thrusts.
Yeah.
Then, the other people that were working with me would help me with that. So when I threw a thrust and they said, you really telegraphed that by doing this, and they knew that that's what I was working on. So then when I was actually working on it, they would provide feedback on that. And that helped a lot too. And that one, just the emotional encouragement of the other people inspired me to go out to practice, because like you said, helmet time is critical. So just, knowing that there was somebody who was going to be disappointed if I wasn't there meant a lot to me. And then when I was there, the encouragement, but then also the active input and feedback on the things that I was working on. And then, as a teacher, I'm sure you've run into this before, in that you learn a lot when you teach. And so when I'm advising somebody else on what they're doing wrong or doing right in their technique, I'm learning from that, and that I'm analyzing the fight a lot more than just I'm out there fighting and I'm out there trying to win. I'm trying to dissect why I'm successful, or why my opponent is successful, or why I'm failing. And that helps a lot. And one thing I would find a lot in times like that, when I started thinking about the mechanics of fighting and why things are working the way they are, is that I would take that away from practice too, where I'm just driving into work and I'm like, oh, you know what? I wonder if I did this or I did that, or let me try this. And inevitably I go try to practice and it would fail horribly. But but I'm thinking about it. I've got that in my mind, and I'm becoming a better fighter even when I'm not on the field, because it's important to me and it's something I'm thinking about. And I think when you're going and starting to dissect fighting and looking at kind of more the intricacies of fighting, you'll find that you start to think about it not just when you're on the field, but at other times as well. And I'm sure that helps you to become a better fighter and a more intelligent fighter, and how you approach fighting and training and those kind of higher level fights where it is a chess match. That's really helpful for those sort of things.
Yeah, I would concur. Thinking about your thinking and thinking about the ins and outs when you're not on the field is, I think, very key to upping your game, particularly after a certain point. Because we all get to a point to where we've got enough muscle memory with enough techniques that we can throw that flat snap nice and crisp, or we can throw that off body in the way that's just perfect. But those shots, once you get past a certain level of fighter, just throwing that perfect shot doesn't mean it's going to get through, and you've got to be able to react instinctually in some cases, and assess data coming in at a high rate of speed, and the only way you're going to do that practically, or practice doing that, is to think about your fighting and have some epiphanies along the way, I think. And I certainly have always made that a part of my game. Particularly, I got to be known when I still was teaching as pretty wicked awesome with a meter stick, throwing shots against air. during my prep time. But yeah, I mean, you gotta, there is a mental component to what we do, and exercising that part of it is key. And having your support group is key too. I too had 3 other guys in my shire, and we're a rather good success story, I think, of fighters that support one another. Ultimately, all of us reaching our goal of knighthood. And I think I would not be. Well, I don't think. I know that I would not be the fighter I am today without their support and their help along the way. So I would concur with that as well. So last sort of thing, and I've done this a couple of other times. I thought about cutting it, but I think it would be fun. Maybe one more time. We'll see what you say. I might cut it. Who knows? But it's the question about if we were going to write, say, a book of knightly fables. What is a story from your either your personal history or your experience, something that you know of your own certain knowledge? What is a story that you might contribute to help teach a lesson to later generations of individuals on the path to chivalry? Doesn't have to involve you, but it may just be something that you know of that happened. But if it does involve you, that's cool too.
I think one of the most important things for people who are aspiring to be in any peer is to have patience. I think that for me, I struggled originally, as a kid, and not getting kind of the recognition I wanted, as I started to become an adult. And then when I came back into the SCA, and I was a pretty good fighter, better than most non-belts, and I was winning lots of tournaments, and my support group, especially, really thought I should become a knight, and were really frustrated that I wasn't a knight. And I tried to be patient, and my father, my knight, advised me that, hey, you've got a lot of skill, but you haven't been playing in the SCA for as long as a lot of the other people who are being knighted, and you're not as well known. You need to be patient. And I tried to do that, and I tried to talk to my friends that were honestly a lot more frustrated than I was, that I wasn't elevated, to talk to them and say, hey guys, this is okay. It'll happen when it happens, and I'm having a good time now. I'll if I am ever recognized, and when I am recognized, I'll be grateful for that. But I'm grateful for the time I have now, and to just be patient. I've seen a lot of people who feel like they've done what needs to be done, that they are a good enough fighter, that they should be recognized, and see them get frustrated, and either pull back or quit completely. I've seen people pass circle, and then out of frustration and being elevated, quit playing. And it's like, you just, I mean, probably in some of those cases, the order dodged a bullet, and that this wasn't somebody who was really gonna help to raise the order up. If they're so easily frustrated, and they're doing it just for the accolade. But I do hate to see people that are deserving or are on the path start to get frustrated in their progress or in their recognition. And so my advice would be to be patient, and certainly from my experiences, as a kid in the SCA, and then as an up and coming knight or up and coming squire who, certainly had more prowess than, a good number of the chivalry, but still wasn't recognized. I think that, I had to be patient and was advised to be patient, and ultimately I think I was. And, that was something that helped me to not get frustrated like some of my friends were frustrated, and still enjoy the SCA. I mean, I enjoyed it the whole time. I mean, there wasn't a time in there where I was just like, I deserve to be there and I'm not, and it's making me angry. It was never like that. I enjoyed all of it. And, that I would advise other people who are on the path to keep that in mind, that, it'll happen when it happens, and to keep doing what you believe you should be doing, to comport yourself as a knight, and then eventually you will be recognized.
I think that's good advice. Last one.
One.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. Similar question, but slightly different. If we were to write a great history book of the Knights of the Outlands, perhaps a great white book of the Order of Chivalry, is there any one moment that you would want to make sure was in that book, a proudest achievement or exploit that Duke Walrick should be known for?
So this is actually what I was kind of going to say, in that I like this question because it got me thinking, and that, the way you phrase the question is in the Book of the Outlands. What would it be? And obviously, I played for quite a long time in Adenvelt. I was knighted there, was a count there, and then came here and have been here for 10 years now. And what it got me thinking about is that I guess first off, what I'm most proud of that I've done here in the Outlands, I would say, is my reign as crown, and not so much winning crown, but the actual reign itself. And in Adenvelt, it was my first reign. It's young. There's a lot of things to kind of figure out. And even though this was a new kingdom, I had lived here for several years before I won crown, but I'd also been crowned before. And so Cecilia and I had a lot of ideas of how we'd like to do things differently. The things that we liked about what we did in Adenvelt, or other things we saw there, things that we liked from crowns here, and of course, respecting the traditions of the Outlands. And we really put a lot of effort into how we were going to be crowned. And Cecilia and I both have backgrounds in drama, in high school and after. And so we wanted to put a lot of kind of theater into our courts. And one of the things that I did that is very out of character for me is when I was made king and was calling for my queen to come, I sang a song. And I don't really sing at all. But, it was something that I thought, and Cecilia and I, of course, talked about it quite a bit, that would be shocking for other people, who've never seen me sing, and I'm not an especially good singer. But I'm okay. But it was something that it's kind of showed, hey, this person wants to do something different. He wants to make an effort and cares about the role that he's in. And we did that at our coronation, but we tried to continue to do that throughout our reign, and thinking about how we can be good crowns and how we could do things that the populace would enjoy, that would help to improve the SCA and the Outlands, that would help to attract new members and, and recognize people that are deserving of recognition. And so I think when I was in eight belt, I did a really good job of the behind the scene things. I dealt with my officers and the barons, and I managed actually Cecilia did a lot of this, but we managed a lot of the awards, and we did a good job at the bureaucracy of being crowned.
Sure.
And what we did publicly was okay. It was a typical kind of first crown. And when we did our second crown, we wanted to put a lot more focus on the role of crown publicly, and so we traveled a ton. We would make sure that we saw every barony, every shire that we could, that were having events. And Outlands is big. I had to fly to some events because they were so far away. But we really wanted to make a big effort on that part. We obviously didn't want the behind the scene things to fall apart, so we made sure we had good people there to support us and make sure that everything that needed to be done was being done. But we focused our attention on the visible side of Crown, and really tried to put a lot of effort into that. One of the things that we did is, and again, I don't do a lot of arts, but one of the things that we did is for every event, myself or Cecilia would make an art piece with our own hands and present it to the autocrat of that event that we attended. And so, I made, 10 or so different pieces of art that I gave out to autocrats throughout our reign. And each one took quite a while. And so, since we were traveling and trying to participate in a lot of events, we were going to events, most weekends. And so during the week between events, we were working on our art in the evenings in order to have it ready to present to that autocrat. And so, I was very proud of the effort that we both put into being crowned, and of the reception that we got to the effort that we put in. We got a lot of positive feedback, and a lot of people years later coming up to us and telling us how having being called up in court and being recognized at their first event, to be given a token by the crown was really impactful to them, or that they remember some of the speeches that we did. And and really saw the effort we did. And one of the things that I did too is I tried to memorize all of the ceremonies, so that when I was doing a knighting ceremony or a laurel or anything, that I had all the lines memorized, so I wasn't looking at having to look at a script or having a herald tell me prompt me on what to say. Try to make it look a little bit more natural by memorizing it. And so I spent, a lot of time working on that. My work is about an hour away from where I live, and I would take a train to where I work. And on the train, I'd be sitting there memorizing lines, and I'm sure I got some strange looks. But it was worth it to me, because the crowns that I had seen before me that did that, I was always very inspired by and very impressed that it made the ceremonies, I think, a lot better. It looked a lot more kind of natural when the crown does that. And that's a lot of effort. And I'm sure a lot of that was kind of inspired by my drama background, in that I have memorized lines many, many times before, and I'm probably a little bit more efficient at it than other crowns are. But I saw the value in it. And so I guess, and to bring us back, that was the thing that I'd say I was the most proud of in the Outlands. But that question got me thinking about it, and with the topic being prowess, I immediately started thinking about fighting. And while I've had some pretty significant successes while I've been in the Outlands, I think they were all somewhat less impactful, in that when I came to the Outlands, I was already a count. And I think that in my mind and in others' minds, the expectation was a lot higher. Yeah, sure, you killed 20 guys in that battle, but you're a count. You're supposed to be pretty good, right? But so the things that I remember as being, really remarkable were when I was a non-belt.
Sure.
And I had a significant success. And that those are the things that I'm like, oh yeah, that was a great day. I did this really cool thing, and it was because I was an underdog, and it wasn't something that was expected of me. And one of the big moments in my career was when I was the warlord of Atenvelt, and we were out in Estrella, and one of the opening battles they did for that day was every kingdom for themselves. So every kingdom, regardless of size, formed up on their own, all out of the battlefield at the same time, and then they just call Leon and you go. And of course, Atenvelt, at Estrella was the largest army, and we ended up getting attacked by a couple of different kingdoms. And after the battle raged for a while, Atenvelt was eliminated, but I managed to survive. And so I was running around as the lone Atenvelter while there were still a few kingdoms left. And eventually the kingdoms or the battle wound down to just three kingdoms. Myself as the lone representative for Atenvelt, and then two other kingdoms who had both gotten down to about 15 people each. And I was running, but it was kind of small enough that you could see that, okay, yeah, there's three distinct groups, one being just me. And everybody had surrounded the battlefield, and we were watching, all the dead had come off to the sides. And the Atenvelt group, saw that I was out there and started chanting, warlord, warlord, warlord. And just hearing that, behind me as a squire, and seeing that I'm the last person from Atenvelt, I'm still in the battle, I'm kind of harassing the other teams, was definitely a memory that I'll always hold in my mind and in my heart as a really inspiring moment. I would have loved to have won and beat those other two armies. I did not, but it was still a great day and a great moment for me that I think was more impactful because I was a squire. I think if I had done that today, I'd still think it was great, but it wouldn't have been nearly as impactful as it was because I was a non-belt and doing something that dramatic and getting the support and encouragement from my entire kingdom kind of on our home ground. It was a big moment for me.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. A very cool glory moment for sure. Duke Walrick, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today about the topic of prowess. I think we looked into it from a couple of different angles, and I think we are both better for it. I've always appreciated your perspective in general, but I do appreciate that that you have thought long about these things, and you have some, in my opinion, some very good advice and ideas surrounding prowess. So I really do appreciate you making the time for me today.
Well, thanks. That was a lot of fun. I'm glad you invited me to do this.
Yeah. So, folks, that's our program. This has been a Chivalry Yo podcast. Our guest for the topic of prowess has been Duke Walrick de Blakeney, and we're gonna continue on. A couple of weeks, we'll come back with another guest and a new topic. Stay tuned till then. Thanks for joining us, and be well. See you later.
nursing their scars, sit the old fighting men broke in the wars. Sit the old fighting men surly and grim, mocking the lilt of the conqueror's hymn. Dust of the battle o'erwhelmed the man hid. Fame never found them for all that they did. Wounded and spent, to the lazzar they drew, lining the road where the legions roll through. Nursing their scars, sit the old fighting men broke in the wars. Sit the old fighting men surly and grim, mocking the lilt of the conqueror's hymn. Sons of the laurel who press to your meed, worthy God's pity most to you who succeed. Ere you go triumphing, crowned to the stars, pity poor fighting men broke in the wars. Nursing their scars, sit the old fighting men broke in the wars. Sit the old fighting men surly and grim, mocking the lilt of the conqueror's hymn. Dust of the battle o'erwhelmed the men hid. Fame never found them for all that they did. Wounded and spent, to the lazzar they drew, lining the road where the legions rolled.